at 6:41. Sorry, we were trying to get some things handed out here that were last-minute emails from various places, responses from the county. All right. Amanda, it's first time I had you here, so welcome. Could you do the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Sean, could you do the opening prayer for me, please?
Father, we just thank you for gathering us once again. Guide us to
All right. This should be an easy question. Do we have confirmation of quorum? All right. We need to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting. I know they got sent out earlier. There were copies sent out, or I know there were software copies sent out. Does anybody have any suggestions, questions, changes?
Yeah,
See
they
'em?
were emailed to you
They came out.
today.
I think
Earlier today.
I think I ended up with at least a dozen CBRC related emails from 7 o'clock to this morning to this evening. So I want to take a quick look at it myself. Right. Does anybody have a motion to accept the approve the minutes?
So moved.
Right, do I have a second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I have an abstention due to I was not present at that meeting. Thank you.
All right. Moving right along here. I don't know if it's picking me up or not. I know our agendas looks light with the budget review, county school presentation points and coverage, but it's probably not light in any way, shape, or form. At least not in my experience so far. I did send out late last night a draft copy of the presentation. Hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at it. I think we have copies for those who need them, if you need a paper copy. And this was mainly me just kind of collating stuff that we've done before, put it all in a presentation. I wasn't sure, I hadn't got the responses to the questions, and we probably should cover that when we get to that section in here. Mary made the suggestion that we cover the stuff we did previously that's not specific to the budget, as these are other things we've already working on. These are works in progress, but we're putting them here as, you know, things that would be of interest in the budget process, but not likely going to be in the budget. Which I think is fair to say, because I don't think budget is just a single time item. So I'm figuring I'm just going to flip through what I have here for the presentation, and we'll get into the open items when we get to them, which is like slide 4. Slide 1's the title. So The review of budgets, all I'm saying is that we reviewed both of them. The practice we did over the past year, at least for me, made it a lot easier to walk through them and focus on the important stuff, because we've gotten through all the what does this really mean questions. You know, what does that mean? What does this mean? But still 2 weeks, even doing that, is insane. And I'll make the point again this year that 2 weeks is really too short to have any cogent answer. Mary might be able to go through it in 2 weeks, but not me. I got the expected laugh from Mary. Slide 3, this is where I talk about some of the discussions with the county. This is something I've had going back and forth with Mary and Mark Taylor, suggesting using some sort of metrics and incentives. The county actually has an incentive program for the employees, and still having a little bit of an ongoing discussion on metrics and what that really means for the county and how to actually pull an efficiency out of a whole bunch of data. In fact, there were emails that I sent last night and came back today, me and Mark going back and forth of what that means. But it pretty much boils down to, and the example I used, and I might allude to this, I'm not spending a lot of time on this slide, is when you talk about things like, you know, whether or not you need to have space for offices. I use the DSS discussion that we had as an example, saying, you know, if you had an idea of how much square footage you need to do your job efficiently, and then as you're going through it, you're like, hey, you know what? 2 years ago, we were great. Last year, we were still pretty good. Now we're actually below that square footage. Maybe we're starting to impact the efficiency. So it gives you an idea that before you're down and cutting into bone and saying, you know what, we've got 4 people in a cube, and one person's coming in at midnight, leaving it, you know, something, we have hot desking and all sorts of crazy things and having to cannibalize space, you know beforehand, hey, I got a problem over here. And that gives you some idea of looking ahead and getting some forward-leaning progress. And that's the reason why I'm bringing this up, is it's common in engineering for looking for part failure and stuff like that. You can use some of the same techniques to combine data. There's a lot of data in the budget from the county, but there's a lot of data that doesn't really mean anything to me. Like the crime rate, 4%. But does that mean like 4% of the people are going to commit a crime? Does it mean we're 4% of the expected? It doesn't really mean anything as a percentage. So I'm trying to work them through something that I think will help them at least identify problems earlier. It may not be able to do anything, but depending upon the economics, but at least they're forewarned. And that's the purpose behind that discussion, but I have to figure out how to make that a little shorter. But I just want to let them know that I'm looking at it in a different way, not just numbers, but how do you combine the numbers in such a way to get more useful information faster. Slide 4, that's an update in previous recommendations. This is just provide some, we had provided previous recommendations in December, and I'm just trying to provide an update. Hey, this is what we heard from the county as to things that, responses to those recommendations. And I think Mary told me that I had accurately provided the updates in an email, one of many from today. Slide 5, those are the big bullet points. 5 and 6 are the big bullet points and the maintenance recommendations. I provided them as they were in the email, and then I took all the secondary items and I put them in the notes for myself, because a lot of the secondary items are the notes that relate to that information. Mainly, this is just to reinforce that these were suggestions we had after going through doing tours of the maintenance facilities, both of them, things we noticed that, or rather things I noticed and we discussed that would be helpful to have improvements in. Slide 6 is the video cameras question, and I know we had an open question related to that, and we'll get to it in just a moment, but that was due to the understanding that there are no video cameras at any of the maintenance facilities whatsoever. And that's just, it seems to be begging the the fates to not let somebody come through and steal, because you won't have any way of prosecuting them at the very least.
Does that include the school maintenance facility?
There are no cameras, according to the school, at any of their
And on the
facilities.
outdoor in the parking lot?
They,
None.
they said none, as in, I took it to mean in or out, as in there's nothing.
That's a fairly new facility.
Yeah, and it's a fairly large facility, and with a lot of equipment parked in the back. You really don't want to lose 20 trucks, or however. Yeah, it's snow, lots of metal, all sorts of stuff's back there. And we do not want to have that stuff walking away or driving away on its own. Or driven, either way. This takes us to slide 7, the open county questions. I had listed these by priority, and this is the same priority I'd sent to Mary. I had handed out the sheet from Mary, kind of looks a little bit like this, just a little smaller. So, not that it makes any difference to people watching on the camera, because they can't read it. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go down the list that they sent us, not necessarily the order that's here, because I don't think they agree, but at the very least, we can pair them up. So the first question, considering inventory control of county maintenance facilities, this is related to, I think that's related partially to some of the maintenance discussion. Is that correct, Mary? So this will probably, might need to update that. All right, this looks like a pretty straightforward update. I might, given the length of that previous slide, I'm just trying to determine the best way of presenting it. Hey, Mary, do you think it'd be worthwhile to use this as part of the audible portion of the presentation, the update that the county has provided related to the inventory control side of the house?
Yeah, I think it probably would be valuable.
I'm just trying to figure out written wise, because it's already a fairly full slide, and
Yes.
if I put it on there, the tab is either going to get really small, or it's going to be over like 2 or 3
Yeah,
slides.
and you don't want your slides to be that crowded. So if you just want to speak to it as far as a response, I think that's probably appropriate.
Okay. Okay. Now, the next one on there, list of county vehicles with GPS units with notion of those that are not working. This is listed as item number 5 on slide 7. So the first line goes to slide 5. This is item 5 on slide 7. Give you guys a chance to read that. All right, any comments, questions on this? If you're not done, just hold up your hand, or I'm not sure how fast I read compared to everyone else. Yes, Catherine?
Did we find out the difference in the food service? It's about $1 million. The difference in what was reported from the county and what was reported in the school board presentation.
That may or may not be in the school.
That's in the information
response.
that was sent just late this afternoon. I did not have a chance to make a copy for everyone. It has to do with there are 2 different charts. One is looking at the expenditures by function, and one is total. And there are some food service expenditures in the food service budget that totals over $11 million that are related to, if I recall, maintenance. and there was one other item, and those, on that other chart that you all saw that had the 10 million, those items are in different categories. So it has all to do with the presentation. There is, 11.3 is the total food service budget. That is the same amount in both places. It's just that one particular slide, it's the way the schools presents that one particular slide that has to do with function, not overall budget, yeah.
So we did not find $1 million there
No,
for them? Okay.
Yes,
No, but we did get clarification as to
Yes.
why it's different.
yes.
Let's see. All right, any questions on item 5 on slide 7 and the second row on, this is gonna be a chore to get this together, from the county response. I don't wanna go through this too fast and give everyone a chance to actually read it and ask any questions. A lot of these updates, I'm gonna switch it from, open county questions to, county questions, and if it's still open, I'll annotate it. I think there may be one that's still open. Just so that we can have a concise slide, and I'll talk to the different ones. I think that'll be the easiest way of handling it without having giant slides. So. No, that's one of them that's still outstanding, is the cost for video for the cameras, which I'll probably talk to on slide 6, and we'll kind of go, and then it's also item 4 on this slide, but I'll just reference how, what I covered on slide 6. Yes, Mary?
I've been working with Jane, and she's got some staff looking into it. We can certainly give you some ballpark estimates of camera cost, but where they're located will make a difference in the cost. If it's located outside versus inside, how many? As I was talking to Catherine earlier today, are we talking about cameras that are monitored, or cameras that just video and then they store, and then after a certain number of days it just writes over top of it? If so, how many days do you want kept? I mean, all of that factors into this. So these are, I went back to my notes from last week's meeting, and I know initially, Jeremiah, this question came from your comments about the maintenance facilities, but I recalled at last week's meeting there were conversations about fueling stations, and so I really needed to have a better idea of where all these were going to be at before we can really give you a cost estimate. So that's kind of up in the air, waiting for those specific answers. We can get you a ballpark estimate per camera, but as you're thinking about it, it would be helpful to understand how, once the cameras are installed, what happens next? I mean, is someone going to sit and watch the cameras? Are they just going to store video for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
What's the normal relative standard in the county for the cameras that we do have?
I'll let Jane talk to you about it.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, it depends. Records retention is all over the place depending on what it is. For example, if we're recording something in the courts, over in the Judicial Center, we might have to retain it longer, particularly if there's an incident that has to be retained. So I can tell you on average we keep things about 30 days, but that can shift depending on what it is, where it is, who it is, and so forth. So 30 days and on up, and some of it we may have to keep indefinitely depending on what it is.
Jane, I'm sorry. Specifically, if we put an outdoor camera at Station 2 on the fuel pumps, and we stored it for 30 days, and where would that go? Would that go to, is that something you're going to upload to the cloud, or does it cost you money to store it?
Well, what will happen is in any type of usually video recording solution, you typically would have a hybrid system, and it would depend on what the retention was of it. So, for example, we put one at Fire Company 2, and we had a 30-day retention. We would record it locally to a device for 30 days, and then if anything needed to be retained past that point, we would either push it off to a cloud or to a primary server that we also have here in our NOC here at the Holbert building. So it would depend. It would depend on how much video, how it's programmed, Is it motion detection? Is it just constantly recording? There's a lot of information that we would have to put together to tell you, but on average, 30 days, it would probably be stored locally. It doesn't save us any money to try to push that stuff off to the cloud.
I have a quick question. Because I understand the different varieties, but then would that probably have to have additional costs for personnel to review all those different
Again,
videos?
it depends on what you want to do with it. If we record video and we only look at the video if there's an incident, or if you want someone to review the video, that's going to create another whole cost for, there's going to have to be personnel associated to review it. I will tell you, more than likely, it will not be monitored 24/7. I don't think I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but I would think that he would not want to monitor any type of cameras that were not in a critical situation on a 24/7 basis. So it all depends, again, on how we program them, and then, you know, like I said, what the incident is. Do you want to wait for a report of an incident? And if the incident isn't reported soon enough, we're going to lose the data anyway. So if it doesn't come in for 3 and 4 months, then it's more than likely gone. These systems are typically not backed up either, unless there's some reason for evidentiary information. They're typically not stored anywhere.
So are you saying that if we install the camera at Company 2, a motion detectable camera, and that it's stored to a device, is that device in Company 2?
It would be in our,
Or would it be
it would be
here?
in an equipment closet that is usually secure within each fire station.
Okay.
Right, we would store it locally. There's no reason to push it back through the network unless there's some reason to pull something back through the network. It's just extra traffic that we don't need to have, so you just have enough storage locally for 30 days. In some situations, we do things different depending on the locality. Of course, we do things differently for the courts. We do it differently for the judicial centers, and for some of our public safety over in the sheriff's office. For example, there is a place out front for folks who can exchange, like what they sell online, a safe zone. Those are retained a little bit longer, just in case. But for the most part, it just depends on the installation and what the direction is that we receive on how you want to, what do you want to do with the data once we receive it.
Okay, thank you.
With your experience, Jane and Mary,
I keep trying to run away.
not fast enough, not fast enough. With the cameras, let's just say we just want to at least have some idea if someone enters a facility's yard, takes something and leaves with it. 2 cameras. Let's just say there's 2 entrances. Outside, because it doesn't make sense to have inside, recorded, hold for 30 days, motion sensing, so it's not all that huge. Or maybe that's more expensive, I don't know. Are we talking about, what are we talking about there? Do you have a rough order, or does that make sense?
I'll have that information for you tomorrow. We're trying to come up with a good ballpark average, but like I said, it can be anywhere from a couple thousand to a huge amount, 10,000 or more per camera, depending on where it's located, what kind of camera you're installing, how much functionality the camera has, and what you want to do with the camera once you've got it installed. The cost of the camera itself is usually not that expensive. It's the installation and then the storage behind it, and all the equipment and licensing that we have to have in order to support that camera.
Okay. That's good to know.
Quick question. Who would conduct this study?
We have a vendor that we've RFP'd out for security cameras. They're currently working on some stuff in our courts right now. So we have a vendor, it's called thank you, as a tech out of Richmond, Virginia.
I also think I like what you said. We need to really double down and decide what we're going to ask for. It's just like my home. I put in security cameras last year. I had to pay extra to have them monitored.
Right.
And so we need to decide what level we're looking at. But when you said fuel stations, Where all are, I'm coming in late to the party, I apologize, I missed our first meetings, I had a death in the family, but what, you said fuel stations, I knew the maintenance facilities, the firehouses, the fuel stations, they have cards, don't they? Is it necessary to have security cameras there?
Part of that question, a lot of those fuel stations are co-located with the maintenance facility and generally in the vicinity of the gate, so it's kind of like a freebie. There is one fuel station I'm aware of that is not in either of those locations. I don't even think it's at a firehouse. I think it's at a separate location. That one, part of the reason why if someone were to go and vandalize it or bust it up and steal gas, you'd have no way of knowing. In fact, you'd have no way of even tracking it at this point. So it's sitting out there. I think that one's out towards the country side of the county. It's west side. And so, yeah, it has a card, but if you circumvent the card, you have no way of knowing who took the gas. And if it's 1,000 gallons, it's a lot of money. So that's part of the reason why we're asking the question is with fuel stations, because fuel represents time, resources, and they're not easy to replace. And the maintenance facilities, they tend to be co-located, then it's beneficial in that regard.
And I do just want to suggest that in our evaluation, we're not just going to look at cameras as the way to secure the facility, so that there is a keyless access that's registered to a person. So there's a multitude of solutions that we can explore, but regardless of what the solution is, there is going to be a cost associated with it, and it just depends on what you want to recommend that we do and how we approach it, depending on what our recommended solution is. So we will give you an estimated cost guideline for cameras, but there's other things we can potentially do to help protect some of those assets and some of those facilities.
Okay, and that's really the whole genesis is finding a way of protecting it, and at the very least, if something happens to it, to do what we need to do to make sure it gets prosecuted and not have us losing equipment. Because the cameras may cost $10,000, but 1 or 2 trucks, and you might be pushing that in a hurry. So,
One more clarification. When you're talking about this, if we make a recommendation, or if you make a recommendation tomorrow evening, are you talking about the school budget paying for the maintenance facility that belongs to the school, and the county paying for the county, or where would the funding come for the school division's maintenance facility if we recommend this? Where will we recommend the budget money come from?
I'm going to jump in here
Okay.
over Jeremiah real quick and just say at this point, unless the board tells us that's what they want us to do, I would not anticipate this funding being available or requested until FY20. This would be, I would consider this a recommendation because there's so much work that has to be done, and we have no idea the cost to tell you to even say we need $5 or $50 or $500,000 at this point.
And in somewhat, it's a sustainable fund you need for the maintenance and the monitoring. It's a
Absolutely.
one-time, which isn't as hard to come up with.
There is ongoing
The
cost for
sustainability
this,
is
right.
very difficult.
Right.
It's my understanding that the schools are already working on this, that they have an RFP out for cameras. So I think they probably have that in their budget, or at least the CIP portion. But my understanding is there is an RFP out now.
I know that they came and talked to us about our contract. I don't know if they found that our contract didn't have what they needed, and they decided to RFP out on their own. But our contract is available for their use if they need it, but there must have been something that they found missing in ours that they needed to have in order to RFP out. I wasn't aware they had RFP'd out yet.
I could be mistaken. Miss Shelley should be able to answer that for us.
And I studied the schools very thoroughly, and I did not see it this year.
and I'm not expecting all this stuff to be like, bam, all right, this is FY19. Because, well, we can always recommend, we can't obligate any funds. Yay, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But from the context of helping the county protect its investments and keep everything in its order, that's the intent here, is saying, hey, do you realize you don't have any cameras? Because I'm pretty sure I didn't realize we didn't have any cameras until they told me. And so it's not so much a question of, hey, we need to do this like now. It's a question of this needs to be planned, this needs to be figured out, and this probably should be looked at and solved, because if we lose trucks or whatever and we can't prosecute it, unless we catch the person driving the truck down 95, you're going to be out a lot of money potentially, so.
I think Mary, I believe I heard Mary say that she's asked you for the list of locations that you know you would be recommending to be evaluated. If there's anything else, just make sure you get us that list, and then we'll go from there. All right?
Now, when I originally had responded back to Mary, I think it was Friday or something, I had said all county and school maintenance locations and fuel stations, of which I only know of one fuel station that's not at there. I just don't know how many maintenance locations there are. I know there's at least 2, and they're right next to each other, so perhaps there's some fun things you could do with that. Even if there's a handful more, that's still limited, but Mary?
Yeah, but as far as specifics, though, I'm assuming that you're not talking about one camera sitting at maintenance. I mean, the maintenance facility at the schools in the county, the county's facility encompasses several different buildings, several different areas.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to know specifically. I mean, are you talking about one at every door? Are you talking about one in certain areas? I've never toured the school maintenance facilities, even though I can see it out my window. But I've never been in it. I mean, and so I'm not really familiar with that. So I'm really not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to be specific as possible to be able to answer these questions for you. If you saw something that you think there needs to be a camera here or there, 3, 4 cameras here, I'm assuming a facility as big as the one out my window needs more than one camera. But that's an assumption that I'm making on my part because I have not been in it. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's why I made the comment earlier about.
That'll be part of our recommendation. If you identify where you think you need camera coverage, we'll help you identify how many cameras and what kind of cameras we need, because there's cameras that can do a wide panoramic view. There's cameras that can be very straight and dead on, and a whole plethora in between. So we'll help with that evaluation, but if you can at least identify the locations and the areas that you want covered, we'll provide the recommendation on how many cameras we think that you're going to have to make that happen.
And I don't know about everyone else here, but my first blush would be the gates, the big gates. The one that you haven't toured, it's got a big, I think it's probably a 20-foot gate when you open both sides on one side, and it's got a 10-foot gate on the other. So if you want to keep track of who leaves and enters with trucks, those are going to be where you're going to look at it. The county can decide later, hey, we want to have that gate and that gate and that gate and whatever. But I think of the facilities, there were no more than 2 gates at each one that I toured. So that's 4 total, but if they're next to each other, which I think may be the case of the county one, you might be able to get both of them with one camera. I don't know it precisely. But that would be my first blush, outdoor 30-day, mostly for the, hey, we can prosecute you because we have you on your truck entering the facility at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's really the what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking Fort Knox here.
You said this wouldn't be able to be funded until FY20 anyway, right?
We don't have a plan yet to fund anything, so we don't even know how much money to ask for.
Right, that's why I'm just
Yeah,
throwing
we
out. So
could-
this is something we can take time,
Right.
because we can't figure this out in the next 20, 30 minutes. So my thing is, we can make light of it, like you were saying, Jeremiah, and then we would have to really, if we got it, that's why I asked who was doing the review. So that means we do have to go and look at some of the maintenance areas and come up with a
And
suggestion.
I have a gentleman that would be more than happy to help you on the county side to evaluate cameras and stuff. On the school side, I don't want to speak for them, but we're happy to help wherever we can. But
Yeah, I'm good with the camera. I'm like, Jeremiah, both of us are engineers. I'm not worried about that piece of it. I was wondering if we were going to have to do it in the first place. So if we do, since we have a year to do that, we would have to come up with a way to come together and do a round robin and then get something back to you guys.
Yeah,
So.
and this is all still part of the section of the presentation is, these are things we've talked about, they're ongoing, I don't expect to have it, here's everything with a bow on it. This is, hey, do you know you don't have any cameras? We found this out during the maintenance thing. We're working with the county to help set up in the most cost-efficient way, and that way to protect the county, and just kind of go from there. And that's why I don't want to be crazy, I don't want to be grandiose. The camera, easily placed, just to cover the big, easy things that aren't being covered right now. That's my thoughts, that's my intent, and I don't think anybody's going to argue with me too much.
I think we can manage that.
Okay. Right. Now, this is item 6 on slide 7. And the third row on the county's response, just to help people keep track of everything. List of fuel-related issues the fleet has reported to departments over the past year. I'll let you guys read that real quick. Hey, Mary, in reading this comment here, it talks about video surveillance of fuel sites, but I am not aware of any video surveillance of any of the fuel sites.
This information came directly from Craig, the fleet manager, so I will confirm with him what videos are there. I
I mean,
feel
there's-
comfortable there are some videos on site at that fleet facility, but I don't know for sure. Have you toured the fleet maintenance facility?
The fleet maintenance facility, I
That's what
toured the,
that's probably what
Yeah,
part of
that-
this is related to. I don't know that
Okay.
every site, but I'll confirm with him which sites have it.
yeah,
It's next door to Thornburg. I'm pretty sure it has
I
them.
think that
Dawn,
one does.
Michelle, do you know if fleet maintenance has cameras, doesn't it? Is this from Mr. Greenlaw?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I will confirm, his comment says here that they have access to video surveillance of fuel sites. I will confirm which ones they have access to.
okay, and the reason I'm asking it, there's some of the fuel dispensing things have video cameras built in, kind of like an
Yes.
ATM. And so that may be what they're accessing, but it's not very specific, so I'd appreciate
I'll find
some
that out for him,
clarification.
no problem.
I think that's the coral zone, like the coral zone sites like we have out there on Route 3.
Probably is. Mhm.
That they video there, and the county does have access to that video if they need to see it. So I'm not sure where the other coral zone sites are, but I think that's what he may be talking
I'll
about.
confirm which sites he's referring to. Mhm.
Thank you. As I'm reading it, I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. I want to get clarification on it. All right, unless anybody has an objection, I'm just going to keep rolling here. This is actually item 1 on slide 7. This is the EDO budget fund. Explaining the increase. The EDO budget fund is funds economic incentives. You know, looks fairly straightforward unless anybody has any questions.
Do we know if these incentives are ongoing beyond FY19?
The incentives vary. I mean, and I believe looking at these, a lot of these are, they're multiple years. They may be 1, 2, 3 years depending on the agreement. There may be some that are one-time items that are funded, but a lot of times it is an ongoing agreement for a certain period of time as long as the company meets a certain set of things that they have agreed to do.
Thank you.
All right, on the next slide, or the next page, the last item, the Economic Opportunities Reserve Fund. That's item 2 on slide 7. And Mary, it talks about in the thing 2018 HDT, flatter, and ENT practice. 2 of those were also mentioned in the EDO fund budget, and IDX, Uniden, and HDT are also listed in the EDO fund budget.
They would be the same. What we would have done in those cases would have been use that EDO reserve and funneled it through that EDO budget to actually pay out those incentives.
Okay,
So
so
they
the
would be the
reserve is
same.
moved forward to cover the cost and
The
then
reserve is a
replenished.
pool of funding available. We would have used that pool of funding, but we would have had to appropriate it through a fund, and it would have been appropriated through the Economic Development Opportunities Fund. So the two questions, while they're different, they have an overlap as far as the responses.
And so is that going to be ongoing, like for some of these companies that have multi-year incentives? Will that money then be funded back again through that reserve fund?
It could be, in some cases, a lot of the ongoing are actually reimbursements of revenues that those companies brought to our county. So if a company's coming into the county and we're anticipating they're going to have additional revenue that we're going to be bringing in relative to their business property, we may incentivize them by giving them a percentage of that back. So that wouldn't have to come through the Economic Development Opportunities Fund. Those things come through our budget. The revenue is seen, and then a piece of it goes back over out to them. In some of these cases, this is some of the upfront stuff they need, maybe a cash incentive to do something initially when the business is started. So.
And Mary is suggesting moving item 3 to the school questions, which is slide 8. And I think I'm going to do that just to keep everything together, unless anybody objects to that. Yeah.
I thought we already did that.
Yeah, we did, but on this slide, I want to move it to the next slide, so keep like with like, so to speak. All right. Which I think moves us to slide 8. Which is the last slide I have printed. Or last slide I have something already done on. Okay. Now, LaShawn sent me a 2-page letter in response to the questions, as well as, I think, 5 attachments. I'm not going to read the attachments. I'm just going to read the basis of the response to make it easy. Let's see. The difference of the FY19 food service budget, we had already kind of talked about that, so I don't think I need to cover that in detail. But it boils down to the split between function 4,200 building services and 4,400 equipment services, and how those things broke down. So, as I suspected, it was one thing in one pot, one thing in another pot, and a big pot. So it was not straightforward, but it was as I expected. And I think we had talked about that on Thursday, being likely. The question, it's question 4 on slide 8. It's question 2, the response. And I'm going to make a note to cross-check and make sure everyone got this. I believe they did. But. Sorry about that. I didn't want to forget that. I had asked, because I didn't know what the answer was, how many gifted teachers are currently employed. The response was they have 20 teachers in the gifted program. Let's see. How much did it cost to provide the administrators a 2% increase? That's number 2 on slide 8. 2% increase for administrators, which includes directors, supervisors, principals, assistant principals, etc., will cost approximately $300,000. Question 4 on the response. Let's see. Ratio of SCPS administrators per 1,000 students compared to the state. I didn't have that captured, but I remember us discussing it briefly during the conversation. The total instructional positions and instructional positions per 1,000. It's in an attachment, and there's a large number of numbers in there, so I'm not going to read those off. There are 132 school divisions. SCPS ranks 128, which is one of the lowest. I'm assuming that means number of positions per 1,000? Okay. She didn't specify, so I wanted to at least ask the question. Item 5, quantify the cost associated with providing health and prescription drug coverage to retirees who have qualified Medicaid. To clarify, well, this is qualified for Medicaid, but I think they talk about both of them in here. SCPS provides a Medicare supplement, but not a Medicaid supplement. Responsibility is related to Medicare. After retirees qualify for Medicare, they're no longer allowed to remain on the division's regular health insurance plan. Medicare retirees are then eligible to sign up for a supplemental Medicare plan. The total premium is $117 per month, of which the retiree contributes $36.30 per month. SPCS contributes $80.70 per month. Estimated costs for this portion of retiree health costs is $651,000. Prescription costs for pre-Medicare retirees are incorporated into the regular monthly health insurance premium. Retirees who are on Medicare are offered a separate Medicare supplemental plan, which is 100% paid for by SCPS, and estimated annual cost for this benefit is $1.1 million.
Can you read that part again?
Which part?
The part, the 1.1 million and what that is being spent on?
Prescription drugs for pre-Medicare retirees are incorporated into the regular monthly health insurance premium. Retirees who are on Medicare are offered a separate Medicare supplemental plan, which is 100% paid for by SCPS. Estimated annual cost for this benefit is $1.1 million.
And who is eligible?
I think retirees who are on Medicare. So anyone who is qualified for Medicare, I think would be then eligible for it. It says they're offered a separate, so I don't think that means it's required. Does that make sense?
Right, but you see, if you look at bill pay, you continually see where they are refunding the total cost of prescriptions to individuals. And wouldn't they be better off to do a Part D plan, which deals with drugs, than to be refunding the actual cost of the prescription? Similar to how within the normal hospitalization, you're going to have a prescription tier. That's part of a hospitalization policy.
I don't really know the answer to that myself.
I think that's something maybe they should look at and see if it'd be cost efficient.
Anyone?
I mean, 1.1 million, and this is for the pre-Medicare retarees?
No, this is
No,
for any
Medicare.
Medicare. Yeah.
Okay. We did ask earlier, since we're on this, Mary contacted Human Resources over at the schools, because when the CAFR was put out, you read the CAFR, when you have a pre-Medicare retiree for the county, the county will help pay, or in some cases totally pay, for that retiree's insurance. They do not contribute to the spouse, covering the spouse or any other dependents. The schools are not like that. Their pre-Medicare retirees are eligible to get the same benefit that an active employee. And so the schools are actually contributing to the spouse and to the dependent coverage. And I believe, Mary, we got back that it was somewhere around $370,000 they could save if they align that with the county and did the same thing as the county.
I believe you're right. I don't, that was in that information I had provided earlier to you. When a county employee retires, the cost of their health insurance is 100% paid by the county. And if their spouse or family, if you want them to be on it, then you pay 100% of that cost out of your pocket. And that is for eligible, if you meet the eligible requirements for retirement. You have to be here for a certain number of years. It's all laid out in that information that I provided to you. On the school side, it's my understanding that they laid out their details. I wish I had them in front of me of how it works for theirs. It's not exactly like ours. There is a bit of a difference, and one of them was that they did allow a retiree to continue to keep their family or their spouse on the policy at their cost as if they were an employee. They pay the same employee rates. I don't want to misquote that, but I think that's what they said. And that, I believe, cost was about, it was under 400,000, but I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But it is in that information that I provided to you all earlier when I gave you this, all the information about comparing retiree and current employee benefits for both schools and county.
That is where I retrieved the figure from. And I know that school employees have repeatedly asked for fair treatment when they've spoke before the Board of Supervisors. And I think the push to maybe align the benefits to be the same or as close as they could get. So that might be a place that schools could look at for $370,000 in savings to put to close the gap.
The other side of that is county employees stay on the county policy. There's not a Medicare supplement policy. That is another piece that we're looking at. So they are different in both sets in different ways. But I believe that specific question about the savings related to the spouse and employee was provided by the schools in an earlier set of responses.
Right, and I remember that Rose, the HR director for the county, came with the, I think, Mark III benefits coordinator, and he did suggest that the county migrate to a Medicare supplemental and Part D instead of paying full Anthem rates.
That has been a topic of discussion, and I
Right.
really
So,
believe it
and
will be
I
soon
think-
brought to the board again. Yes, ma'am.
I think that needs to be put in our presentation. Both of those things, the savings for the schools and the savings for the county. Because I remember the Mark III benefits coordinator, he said it would save the county a lot of money.
I believe you're referring to Lee Deskins, who is the health insurance
Yes.
advisor, who is the
Yes.
advisor for the county and the schools. Yes.
Mary, how much is what they're paying now, the drug part? How much
Who's
per
paying?
person? The schools. So
I don't have the schools, I mean, I can probably dig through my binder and try to dig up the information, but I don't have it right in front of me.
because my father's currently paying $194 a month on Medicare Part D. So if it's around the same, or if it's less or more, that's what I'm wondering about.
The information is in the information that I provided to you all. I know Michelle and Rose did a really good job of getting you as much information as possible. It was a lot of information because there is a lot of pieces to that puzzle. The other factor that for school employees, they get the health insurance credit, is that what it's called? I can't remember, through VRS. And county employees, other than constitutional officers, don't get that. So there could be some costs that are charged to a school retiree that they get reimbursed through their VRS payment that we don't have on the county side. So while I understand the fairness point of wanting to do things alike, there are very different pools of people that make it a little more complicated than that. I
And
think-
schools have no say in VRS?
No,
None.
that is part of that deal that they pay into that health, I think it's called a health insurance credit. And you earn it based on your number of years of service. So one employee who's been there for 30 years may have a bigger credit than someone who retires and was only in the school system for 20 years. So all of that plays into the total picture, and that's why it's so important if you can, and I can resend you that data if you need it, and I know it was a lot of information, but the details were all in there, and I know that Rose and Michelle really did a good job of trying to get all the information you needed to compare those two, so.
Well, I also know that the schools have already changed their retiree benefits money to anybody hired after '09. They're going to have to pay everything up to $214, and the county's only going to pay, or the school system's only going to pay $214 towards their health insurance.
That's an excellent point. I don't know that I can confirm exactly the numbers that you just gave, Dawn, but there have been changes over the years. And there are grandfathered people in that may get one benefit that other people are not getting. And so Michelle and them tried to do a good job of telling you what's happening now. So we need to be careful when you hear someone say that they're getting so-and-so, they may be in an old grandfather plan that doesn't exist anymore, that no one can get. So it's very, it is a little more complicated than just here's A and here's B and compare them. It does take a little bit of thought and review, and there are differences, and I know the county has made some changes to when people can retire and when they're eligible for these things. Both sides have done that over the years. And there are multiple different levels of
And you
grandfathered
know,
people.
we've looked at consolidating this so many times.
Yes.
And it's just two different entities, and right, at the times, it's just not advantageous to do it.
Right, it is, I think we're going to find that it's a little more complicated than what people realize. We have consolidated the administration of it, and that was a significant savings when we consolidated one administration, but we are a self-funded pool of people, which means we are paying the bills for our county and school employees when they go to the doctor. When you get your EOB and it says, this is your share and this is the insurance share, we are the insurance share. We're paying 100% of that. And so those bills can be significant. That's what insurance is about. And so it takes some looking at those pools of people. You also have a very different, and I don't want to say anything that's going to bother anybody or upset anybody, but, you know, we have a lot of firefighters and police officers on the county side. It's probably our bulk of staff. Y'all have a lot of teachers. They're probably not the same pool of young males who are firefighters and police officers as there are teachers. I'm assume probably more females than males. All of that is very different, and so you want to, like, and I am not an insurance expert. I know there are some people either on both boards or in different areas that know more about this, but when you look at a pool of people, you have to understand what that pool is about, what type of benefit they need, and how that pool is managed. And that's what insurance is all about. Everybody pays the same rate. Not everybody uses it every year. Some people are sick, some people aren't, and then those healthy people are what helps to fund that rate to keep it down to a certain level. It's all about managing that pool of people. It's a little bit of an art as much as it is a science to it. So I think you need to be careful. But definitely, I know it is on the board's radar. They want this looked at, and it is in the plan to be looked at in the very near future. So certainly, if you want to make a comment about it, but there are going to be more conversations. Dr. Baker and Mark Taylor have been tasked with getting together to make that happen. There are going to be meetings, so they're on it. I know that's on their radar to do that. So.
And with about a grand total of 22 hours before I actually present in that seat over there, I don't think I have time to have a cogent answer on it, let alone everything else.
Can you make those two recommendations, though?
If it's already on their board, I don't know if it is worth our time to do so.
I think it's very much worth it.
What recommendations are you asking about the insurance?
Just to, like, put down, because we've never formally in a presentation suggested that the county migrate their Medicare eligible employees to a Medicare supplemental and Part D. And I know I'm the only one, I think, up here, you know, that is Medicare. And having come from a school system and a very, very good plan, and then moving to that, I actually pay less premium, and some of my drugs that I would have had to pay more on that were like level 3, level 4 tier drugs, I now get for a minimum amount of money under $10.
But you're talking about the county.
I'm talking about the county migrating to the Medicare. And I'm also talking about the schools considering discontinuing paying for spouses and dependents for retirees. That would save them about $370,000 is the answer we got from Michelle. And I can forward you that email if you'd like to see it.
And I believe you. There's just so many other facets to it. I couldn't support the latter, but I can support the first.
Well, I think that they, you know, and that's entirely up to the school board, but they need to, you know, we are looking at a $2 million gap, and they have really made great strides in moving to be, you know, with their health insurance program and modernizing it and putting in like an employee plus spouse category. And, you know, it would be up to them, but certainly we could suggest they even look at it. They may not want to do it.
Greg, you look like you're on the verge of saying something.
Well, I was going to let you. I guess we haven't come to a conclusion about whether we want to speak to this or not. I was trying to
That's kind of
Yeah.
that's kind of the question at hand.
Um,
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep the presentation on point and not spend the rest of the evening writing it. And I don't know if I can write a cogent answer before tomorrow. However, it doesn't mean we have to shelve it. Does that make
Because I
sense?
was thinking not so much, not just an answer, but being able to go into maybe a more detailed response if the board has questions. I don't know if you're ready to, or we're ready to really be able to do that right now as well.
Greg, will you be there tomorrow? I think as vice chair, the two of us should be up with him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think to keep from putting this on the spot again, I don't think we should make a note of it. This goes just like along with the cameras, because it was very great discussion. If there's a savings that can be made from it, we do need to make a note of it and carry it forward at some point. Tomorrow would not be the time to try to fit this in, because look how long we're discussing it now.
Why not?
It's 'cause
Because
he-
we spent a lot of time, we spent months and months going through the school budget. And right now, I mean, we're talking about budget items and trying to find savings. And the gentleman that Mary referenced, didn't want to say it was millions, but he said a significant amount of money. I thought it was $1 million or more that they could save on the county side. So I do think it's relevant.
I think I would put a motion on the table to table it.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to table the discussion for providing 2 recommendations related to healthcare and Medicare recipients on the floor. It's been seconded, so I think we can go into discussion, although we've kind of already had a fairly extensive discussion prior. So I think unless there's further discussion, we should probably move to calling the question. So is there any further discussion to have?
Only clarify what the question is. What are we voting on exactly?
The 2 recommendations that were provided was this, the motion is to table the two recommendations to a later date. If you'll accept a friendly addition to the next regularly scheduled meeting March.
That's not a presentation.
No, but it's enough time to actually have a discussion to hammer out things. I believe that's the intent. And the two recommendations to be tabled are that the county migrate all Medicare recipients to Medicare Supplemental Part D, and having the schools set their, try to read this off here, align retirement health benefits with the county by only providing the employer share to the retiree and not spouses and children. I believe that's everything. If there's any further question or any further discussion, I think we move to calling the question. Anyone who is in favor, I'm going to make sure I say this but carefully, who is in favor of tabling the 2 recommendations till the next meeting for discussion purposes?
Aye.
Yeah, all right. I have 5 ayes. I'm going to abstain since I'm running the vote. And that leaves nays. Nay? Okay. So the the vote to push this off to the next meeting for discussion purposes carries 5-1, and I abstained. Okay. On to question 6, which corresponds to question 1 of slide 8. With the membership increase of 82 students between FY18 and FY19, this is related to one of their school board expected, don't remember what the terminology is, but expected attendance, I think, is more or less what it is. How can the division justify an additional 16 general education teachers? I've got a decent explanation here. So SCPS is not staffed adequately based on current student enrollment. Specifically, student enrollment from October 1, 2016 to October 1, 2018 is expected to increase by 304 students. Therefore, the 16 new general education teaching program positions are based on both current and next year's enrollment figures. There's a little section here on the SOQ standard for general education teachers vary by level and by content. Currently meeting the standard, but experiencing large class sizes at every level in most content areas. For example, we have multiple classes with 28 students at the elementary level. We are taking a tiered approach to reducing class sizes. We need significantly more general education teachers to address all large class sizes. There's 2 bullets here. General education teachers needed for growth we experienced in the past, as well as anticipated growth for next year. The governor's low class size initiative provides partial funding to school systems for identified schools. Student to staff ratio requirement as part of this initiative is based on what school need. Some schools are required to keep class sizes in grades K through 3 no larger than 23:1, while others must maintain a class size no larger than 24:1. The following schools have been added or adjusted for 2018-2019 school year. They don't say whether or not these are elementary, but I believe that's the case. Berkeley, adjusted from 24:1 to 23:1. Lee Hill, new to the initiative. Smith Station, new to the initiative. And Wilderness, new to the initiative, but there are no numbers that correspond to those. For those keeping track, a increase of 304 students with just the teachers, the 16 teachers, is a class size of 18. I don't know if you're able to answer this directly, Ms. Shelley, but I would have to ask the question, are you actually able to drop your number by a whole student per teacher ratio with only 16? It's, the numbers in my head doesn't seem to add up very well.
That's 6 at the beginning.
Okay. And Ms. Shelley, can I ask you to talk at the podium so the people who are watching, all 3 of them online, I don't really know, I'm just making those numbers up, can hear you.
Okay, ask me the question again, please.
There, in the justification for the 16 general education teachers, they mention an increase of 304 students. If you just take that increase and divide it by the number of teachers, it's only about 18 students per teacher, which granted is well below, but it also means the ability to quote-unquote dilute, using the term as reducing the number, is going to be marginal. If you just, I mean, in a particular class, you can probably reduce that number, but as an average, which is what I think these numbers are talking about, 24:1, 23:1, you're not going to have a huge impact. And that's what I'm trying to understand is how does 16 teachers spread across 4 schools or more, they only mentioned 4, how is that going to reduce your numbers by 1? Because if you just take 4 classes at 24:1, multiply 24 by 4, then subtract by 1 or 2 extra teachers, do you really get down to 23?
It's for the low class sizes, that's the governor's mandate, another unfunded mandate, but we get a little bit of money, not fully funded, of course, as everything else. But it's it's the low class size. But I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, but with the, we count the other classes are average sizes. So when we say 24 students per teacher, that's average across the division. It's not per school.
Okay, that's kind of why I'm asking the question, is averages, to get a number to drop by 1 usually requires a fairly large increase on one side, very large increase in the teachers or a very large decrease in students. That's what I'm trying to understand.
But what they
how that
might be
number
doing
comes
is
up.
balancing from other grade levels as well. You'd have to talk to instruction on how they got those numbers. I don't know exactly how those numbers came about.
Okay.
But to add to her answer, even before the governor's mandate that is poorly funded, I can tell you why they could use, in 2009, I've done every budget since 2008, I've studied every budget since 2007. 2009 was our last year to have any fully funded programs. Everything went off the table. So what happened is the school division of Spotsylvania County began not replacing people who retired. And it was done through attrition. We didn't give a pink slip. We've never given a pink slip. But what we were doing was we didn't replace people. So what's happened is from 2010 to today, we are still playing catch up, just like we are with activity buses. It's still just a pilot program. I mean, between Dawn and I, we could name off 1,000 programs that are just getting back. So 16 isn't even close to what they need. So it's going to be advantageous to have 16, but you have to look at the history of what we all went through in the country. But in the public school I happen to be familiar with, we stopped hiring when we needed in 2010 because that's when the money dipped.
I guess, I'm somewhat confused because when the school board, when Ms. Gramp and Mrs. Shelley presented their presentation on the budget to the Board of Supervisors, I know there was extended conversation by Mr. Skinner, who was very pleased about the low class size. Now, what I've been able to find about this initiative is it's K through 3. Is that your understanding?
It's K-3, low
And
class
so-
size, governor's mandate.
Sure, it's a
for
mandate
schools.
or is it
It's-
an initiative?
It's an initiative. I get the words mixed up. So it's an initiative. It's a governor's initiative, low class size for schools that have low socioeconomic enrollment.
And Lee Hill Elementary would have that?
We are adding 4 schools to our list for next year.
Okay, and Wilderness Elementary?
Wilderness Elementary as well, yes. Before, yeah.
With Robert E. Lee with a 40% free and reduced lunch rate is not Title I. And it's the first time since Title I started that Robert E. Lee is not Title I because we had so many other schools. Population explodes so much that you only get 10, is it? 9 or 10 schools, the bottom 10 in money.
I
I
have
can't
forgotten that
remember.
number.
We were off by 3%.
And it has something to do with it's not an actual percentage, like 50% students. It's, there's a formula. for
Okay,
Title
so
I.
schools would be getting, if we have these schools now being classified as Title I schools, they'll be getting increased federal funding for
That
that.
does not necessarily mean they're going to be Title I schools.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I
No,
thought you
no,
said these
low
four schools.
socioeconomics, but not necessarily Title I.
Okay.
Their free reduced lunch number has gone up. That does not necessarily mean they're going to be Title I.
But we know that parents fill out the free and reduced lunch form at the beginning of the year, and that is never verified by schools as to whether what they put down is correct or not.
There is a percentage that are getting verified. There is some type of what's the word? Thank you. There's like an audit for our free and reduced.
See, and teachers aren't even allowed, at least at my school, to even look at that list.
No, the teachers cannot see the list.
but-
The teachers, it is, no.
Right.
Your teachers cannot see who is on free and reduced.
Right.
It would be, the audit takes place with the food services person who is in charge of our applications for free and reduced lunch.
Okay. All right, but none of those four schools now have moved to Title I status?
I can't say yes or no, I don't know for sure.
Dawn, if
I
they did.
thought Lee Hill had.
I don't know which
But
schools have, if they
yeah.
have.
I know for sure Riverview has, but
I just know that we are adding schools for the governor's low class size initiative.
and the way it works is, I mean, like 4th and 5th grade in my school could have 32 kids in it. But K1, 2, and 3 would have 24 or less.
There are state guidelines on the student numbers, and then having to make parents aware or add a paraeducator if class sizes get above a certain number.
Which we had to do one year when kindergarten got to 32 in one classroom. We had to add a para
You had to add,
to help that teacher out. Would have been nice.
All right. I think we have gone over that one sufficient. Question 7, please explain what makes up a year-on-year wage and benefit variance found on page 70, function 6820, technology, instruction support. I think this is the question you asked, Les. How does the 427,474, it's question 7. I don't have that on my sheet. And she grabbed a couple extra that I had left off when I was writing this last night. I'm reading the question off. Please explain what makes up the year-on-year wage and benefit variance found on page 70, function 6820, technology, instruction support. How does the 427,474 relate to the additional technology positions referenced on page 49, the ITAs? I had left this off this morning, I'm sorry.
This, with this free benefit, what this was pertaining to was there was a pretty significant increase, over 10% on that one funding line. And I wasn't sure if it was because of the Evergreen study or if it was additional positions that had been hired on.
Where are you looking at, Les?
But that was from the budget. That
It was
actual
page
budget book, I believe it was page 70.
49 in the school budget.
Yeah, I was asking for a clarification on that number.
And so the clarification is the following. In the expenditure trends by function report on page 70, which he included as attachment D, the amount reflected in the FY19 budget includes the additional 8 ITAs at a cost of $319,088, plus the compensation increases allocated to all of the other existing technology instructional support staff at a cost of $108,386. So it's a combination of the two numbers. I'm gonna make myself a note to add the ones I missed. I did see one that they did not cover that I did remember to add. There was a question about what careers positions did the Evergreen study not cover or touch. I think that was a comment made, and I do not see an answer to that, so that's still open from the school's Evergreen study. Yeah, which is why we had asked the question about, they made the comment, oh, there's some that weren't included. And we said, well, which ones? And they said, get back to us. And so that's still an open question. I do not anticipate an answer between now and then. It could happen. Don't get me wrong. I just probably won't have it in the presentation. I believe that is all the information I have on the open ones. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. For this, since we've covered a lot of information in the last hour and a half, what recommendations related to the FY7 or FY19 budget do we want to make, if any? Do we want to say, we ask questions, we're going to continue working on it, but otherwise it looks good? Or do we want to make some recommendations budget-wise, or?
I've got not really recommendations for the budget, but there are 2 recommendations actually that are probably quantifiable and make sense. One of the things I notice every year is that we always have the county employees and our school employees are always fighting for increase in wages. Well, it's pretty easy to justify a COLA raise. You base it on a CPIW. And more specifically for the southern region. We are in the southern region. Southern urban region is technically where we're at. This is quantifiable. They've been keeping records on this stuff since, I believe, 1917. Wow. It's readjusted every month, and you make the adjustment once a year. Your military retirees are on it. Your disabled veterans are on it. Everybody that's on Social Security is on it, and SSI recipients are on it. That's just one more thing that would help with the county and the school employees not losing their purchasing power every year. And it seems like it would be a lot easier for planning for the budget. because this is something you can go back over the last year and look, okay, we had 1.9% CPIW over the last year. That's what we can index our COLA raise on this year. Why we don't do that as a county or a school, I don't know, because it just makes too much sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 75 million people wouldn't already be doing that.
How do you know
Actually, I don't believe they do. I mean, I've never seen how that's been calculated.
So officially, I want to make sure I have this right. So you're suggesting using the CPIW to set the COLA for county and schools? Is that
County and
correct?
schools both, because it's quantifiable, and more specifically, CPIW for urban and clerical wage earners for the South Urban region. I'll send you that. I can email you those specifics.
And Mary has stepped to the podium.
Yeah, please email me the specifics. We, years ago, many years ago, before 2009, on the county employee side, there was a cost of living increase that was based on the CPI. I am not sure that it's exactly that particular factor. As we noted the last meeting, there are multiple factors out there that you can use for a CPI review, but there was a CPI and there was a merit increase. The CPI moved the whole scale up because the assumption is everybody in that position would need to be moved up. The merit moved you up the scale. And then when the economy tanked, everything went off the table. There was no more conversations about any regular increases at all. It was a year-by-year basis on what the county could afford and what was happening in positions. And it varied tremendously. There is a documentation in the information that's gone out to the board on the questions in the past that list every year what happened, and you will see there were years where there was very little, if anything, that was done, and that was intentional. Les, I think everybody agrees that those are not bad factors to use, but there was no guarantee that could be given to employees because truly we were hanging on by our fingernails trying to balance the budget.
Right, understand.
But now, last year, Mr. Taylor did, during the Evergreen presentation, did suggest to the board, and that is what is now recommended in the 19 budget, that we each year now on the school side, on the county side, give a cost of living that is driven by the CPI. We will look at that every year. If you will send me the information that you have here on this particular piece that you're talking about, I don't know that it's that exact piece, but I have the exact piece of information that we're looking at in our documentation back in my office, and that will be a consistent thing that we will look at every year. And the county also proposed, and the board agreed, to longevity pieces for county staff. So at certain points, and it'll be, when you reach a 3-year point, you'll have a 0.5% increase. When you reach 5 years, you'll get a 1% increase. 10 years, 1%, 15, 1%, and 12 years, 0.5%. So that would be the county's plan for compensation from now on out, based on what the board approved when the Evergreen study was presented for the county last year. Then the last piece of that we still need to catch up on is bringing those positions to market that weren't at market. We had a handful of positions that were not at market. We only did a third of them last year. We'll do a second third this year, and we'll do the third next year, and then after that it will be CPI and longevity every year based on what the board approved for the county side. Now, the schools is still working through their compensation study. Those details need to be ironed out, but that was presented by the county administrator and approved by the board last year.
And I can tell you that a big problem in that is going to be people like me who have been working for the last 12 years, and I am $20,000 below the midpoint where I should be. So
right, the evening out that falls under the Evergreen study. That's something totally different. The thing that the COLA is easy. That's just one facet of the compensation package. And like you said, when this came up, I believe you said 2009. I'm looking at the tables, the historical tables right now, and the reason being is because we were in deflation at the time. I mean, you're looking at some months here in 2009 where you were running negative 0.2, 1.8, and this is on a monthly basis. Is how fast the economy.
Right, but you can't look at a monthly basis when you're looking at an annual increase. Yes, so I don't disagree. Back in those days, Les, we did all that analysis. We looked at it on a monthly basis. We knew that there were negatives, but annually there was some level, even if it was minor. I think there may have been one year that may have actually ended up in a negative. But if you look at the actual, most people talk about the percentage, the 2% cost of living. But if you look at the actual factor that's behind it, that factor had gone up over that from 2009 till 2015 or so, when we started back, or 16, into actually looking at it significantly. And county and school staff increases did not agree with that cost of living. But it was at a period of time where everybody just understood. I mean, there's nothing you can do when you don't have enough funding to make it happen. So the county administrator is trying to do exactly what you're suggesting, that we come up with a consistent way of doing that, and that we do it every year. As far as the actual, I wrote down southern urban region. I have details on my, in our information from the Evergreen study that tells you exactly which factor we're using. I don't recall it being that one, but if you'll send me what you have, I can compare and tell you what we used based on our research of what we thought was the most appropriate information to pull up each year to look at. And we are looking at a consistent factor. Now, I will tell you, on the county side, a 1% COLA is in the somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. I used to run the numbers, and so I don't have it off the top of my head now that I'm not in there running them. 2% is typically what happens, 1.5%, 2%. But you can have a year where you have a 4% increase, and if you say we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And then we're talking about now, instead of a $500,000 or $1 million, we're talking a $2 million increase right off the top. So we understand and we agree that there probably needs to be some consistency, but we don't control that CPI. We will have to do what it says if we decide to do that.
Right.
And the schools' COLA is much more.
I want to say 1% for the schools is 1.7. Is that correct? We're double the size, though. We're
Triple,
the biggest
I think,
entity.
almost triple the size of
Yeah, we
us.
have over 3,000 employees, so we're the biggest entity in Spotsylvania County.
Right.
So that's why ours is so expensive.
That's what we'd love to do, and that's what we're aiming to do less. But whether it will be able to be funded in some of those years when those numbers come out, I don't know.
I would think, as many federal government employees that we have in this county, as many federal government contractors that are also indexed somewhat to that rate, I mean, this is pretty easily justifiable. And also, you get those years when you go into recession and you're at zero inflation. Well, don't be expecting a COLA raise, because it's like 2009.
I don't disagree, but I will say to you that the difference in a federal and a local government budget is we have to balance it.
Deal.
We have to have money, and the federal government doesn't. And for years during that 7, 8, 9, those years, we heard a lot of grief, and, people try to say that federal government employees didn't get raises, and they did. They might not have gotten their steps. And I think there was 1 year where it was actually on hold, but they got those cost of livings built in. They don't have to balance a budget. We do. We have to have a balanced budget, and that does make a big difference. And when we are a service organization, over 50% of what we do, and I think over 70% of the schools, is personnel. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's huge. These are where the meat of our cost is in our personnel, because it takes people to provide services. So, but I say all that to say we agree. We don't disagree that there needs to be some standard, and that's what county administrator presented last year, and that is what got put into the FY19 adopted recommended budget, so that we would have that plan from here on out. So, okay?
Thank you. I mean, that way we don't get into these where we have to go out and do evergreen studies, because, we've got such a wide variation within the county and the schools.
So are you okay with leaving this as kind of something you work on the side with Mary, since it's already been recommended, and at least the CPI?
I'll send well, it's actually a super price index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. Southern urban, not seasonally adjusted. Yeah.
Okay, are you okay with just kind of holding on that, and so you can work with Mary?
Okay.
Okay.
We'll work with Mary on it. And then the second one is, the second one was, one thing I've noticed working, well, we had one meeting with the schools, with the IT, and I've had several meetings with Mary, and one thing, we're still stovepiped between the two organizations when it comes to purchasing. The schools probably have a lot more hardware buys in IT, and this just it's not limited just to IT. It could be just about anything that both entities buy. We need to find a way for those purchasing departments to combine their purchasing. That's acquisition 101. The more widgets of whatever you buy in quantities, you will usually get discounted prices. And I understand that the schools have, you know, a lot different, the hardware purchasing in the IT department goes mainly for supporting instructions. So it's not gonna be, it can be some oddball things out there that they're buying to do that. But in general, when you're talking about commodity hardware, an HP laptop is an HP laptop regardless who's buying it. We could probably get some more economy of scale on the purchasing if that liaison would be made between the departments.
That is too something that we've been looking into, let me back up a step, and that's something that we do on a regular basis. Our procurement divisions talk to each other all the time about what is being procured. We are going to try to do a better job of explaining that to everybody, because that is a question that comes up a lot. And a lot goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, that we don't talk about publicly, but that is happening. They are two different entities. And so some of what we procure is different. Some of the services we procure are different. When you're bringing people into a school, there are different requirements for those people that walk into a school that are able to access children than what we may need as far as in a county building. So there are differences. But as far as products like paper and that type of stuff, we're always looking at opportunities. But what I will tell you is a lot of what we procure is already on large cooperative contracts that are bigger than Spotsylvania County and schools. 3 and 4 times our size, state contracts, Fairfax, Arlington, big, huge Prince William contracts. When they're written, they're actually give us ability to ride them, and whenever possible, and it is cost effective, that's what we do. So we're already doing that through our cooperative purchases that are 3 and 4 times the size of anything that we would get from Spotsylvania County schools and county together. So I just want to say we are doing it. And sometimes it is just that we are purchasing off of a contract that's a state contract. Most of our vehicles are off state contracts. That's the state of Virginia has issued a contract for those prices, and we're allowed to use that. And we do, whenever possible. Now, to IT purchases, I think Jane may be able to provide some more information.
So just ditto on what you just said, but we don't use just state and other local Virginia contracts. We use large national contracts that are procured, so we already have the large-scale purchases for common items like servers and PCs and laptops and items such as that that we use on a regular basis. We always look for the best price, the best contract, to get the lowest cost possible. I don't know that there would be a volume discount beyond, even if we purchase with the schools all at the same time, there would be, because the contract is already built in those prices for whatever it is that we need. Knowing that technology changes, however, and knowing that a lot of the technology requirements are different between the schools and the county, we can't standardize. But there are some things. Cisco routers, for example, would be a perfect example of something we could buy in bulk, but I don't know that we would save any money by buying it in bulk. It just means the purchase order would be larger. So I just wanted to add that.
Hey, Jane,
Yes.
you didn't walk away fast enough.
I know, I can't move fast enough tonight.
Now, everyone talks about like Cisco routers and all that other stuff. What about all that wiring that goes with it? I mean, are you guys purchasing that cooperatively as well? I mean,
Our cabling, we have
Yeah.
2 vendors. We have an inside vendor and an outside vendor. We actually RFP out for that. We're in I think the second year of a 4-year contract that was just recently RFP'd out, maybe the 3rd year, I can't remember. But that is a competitively procured process, and we do share that contract with the schools. They either write off of us or they RFP and we write off of them, vice versa.
okay, is it kind of like an alternating,
Yeah.
this year we'll do it, next year you do
It
it?
just depends on who gets to it first.
Okay.
And so we do, those are many of the items that Mary mentioned that we do collaborate on a very frequent basis behind the scenes. You may not see it, the board may not see it, but it is a regular event that we work with the schools wherever we can, and the schools works with us wherever we can, especially on those commonalities such as that.
Okay, no, I wanted to ask because everyone thinks of Cisco routers and monitors, and very few people think of plugs and power strips and the little doohickeys that you end up purchasing at.
So what ends up happening is that we have racks, we have power requirements, whether we do PoE switches or whether we have to have special switches that don't require PoE. So there's a lot of things that we do, but we do work, like I said, collaboratively with the schools wherever we possibly can. And if there's ever an opportunity that you think we're not, please just let us know, and we're happy to take a look at it. But I think we talk to the schools quite a bit, know what they're doing for the most part. They know what we're doing for the most part, and do collaborate as much as we can. Thank you.
All right. Is that everything you had there, Les?
Yeah, that was, that was the big two.
Okay. Catherine, you got a question?
Mary.
That too early?
I have a couple of questions. The first one is, I know that the Board of Supervisors are agreeing to a 3-year plan to implement Evergreen. I didn't know if there was any agreement past that. But I also, last year, the county employees only got 1.3% if they didn't get the longevity
No,
piece.
everybody got the 1.3.
And that, percentages are so misleading. So I did a little bit of quick math, and let's say that we had a firefighter that was in year 2, or a deputy that was in year 2. They would have only gotten $33 a month. I mean, my question is, why didn't they get 2%?
Because that
last
wasn't
year?
the cost of living last year. It was based off the cost of living factor, and at the time that we did it, 1.3 was the percentage.
Okay,
So
okay.
that varies from year to year. I mean, it could be 1% next year, it could be
Okay.
3%. So-
Okay, so, but the schools got 2%.
Well,
so
they're
they-
doing theirs this year. So
No,
this
but
year's a
they got
different
a
year.
2% COLA last year.
Overall, they did not do their study last year. They just did.
Right, but they didn't
percentage.
look at the LCI or LSC or
I
whatever
don't
it
know.
is.
They'd have, I'm not
index.
sure how they did that. yeah.
Okay, well, I was just sort of concerned about the county employees only getting the 1.3.
That would have been based on the CPI last year.
Okay.
And if you had been here for the year, you got the 1.3%. If you had been here for 5 years, you got 1%, 10 years, you got 2%, 15 years, you got 3%. And then your job was looked at on that compensation study, and if there was still additional funding, you got 1/3 of that. And so it was different. Everybody was treated differently because people's jobs came out differently on that study.
Well, I want to ask specifically, and this is a FREM question, that I think some of the officer positions were 40% below market.
That's part of what I explained last
So,
meeting.
so did they get, let's, just for example, let's say it's a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were 40% below market, did they get like 1/3 of that last year? With the idea that hopefully after 3 years, everyone's at market?
The goal was to bring everybody to market, but as I explained last year, last week, you cannot look at a 40% above market on a scale and assume an employee is going to get a 40% increase. That was the market study looking at the position.
Right.
What was the scale for the position, is what that was saying. Then you have to take the person and put them on the scale. In some cases, the scale may have been off 40%, but the position was not 40% underpaid. They may have been on the scale where they needed to be based on a number of things that could have happened over the years. So just because a scale says that it's off does not mean the people are going to get that raise. But for the most part, the larger percentages that were off were the ones that got the larger percentages, not 40% necessarily, but whatever it was that the study determined they did need to have, wherever they needed to be placed. They got 1/3 of that in 18, they'll get the second third in 19, and the third in 20.
So they may not ever reach the bring to minimum, is what you're saying.
Now, everybody is at minimum. Every single
So we
county
did
employee
bring
was brought to
everybody up.
minimum.
Okay.
Yes. And that is the plan for schools, I believe, is to make sure everyone gets brought to minimum. The minimum
Right.
is just the beginning scale. There is no county employee that's paid below the minimum.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, I think this brings us back to the question. With the presentation, I'm going to update I'm going to take open out of the slide 7 and 8 and say, these are the questions we asked, and if it's open, I'll annotate it, otherwise I'll give a shortened answer. But that still leaves us with the FY19 budget documentation. Do we want to make any specific recommendations to that budget, or do we want to say we don't have any recommendations at this time? It's great. Give Mary a huge raise. I don't know.
Why don't we look at the things that we not funded?
Well, yeah, exactly, because honestly, I think every department has done an excellent job with their budgets, and they have for the last several years where they've been cut and cut and cut and cut. And honestly, I think every department needs to be fully funded this year.
I have a question. So this is request beyond the equalized rate, so I assume it's not in the budget. And it's 24/7 ALS staffing at Company 4, 24/7 ALS staffing at Company 8. And I am sorry, Chief, but I forgot what you said about that. Are those folks out there in 4 Mile Fork going to get ALS coverage?
Actually, we're making some changes to our current, to the schedules of our current employees, actually at the end of March, to make sure that we have some ALS staffing available in every station in the county. So the additional positions that we're requesting is to basically change the staffing in those stations to provide full staffing of a baseline of basically an engine and a medic unit in those stations to create some also depth in that. So we don't just have one ALS provider. Right now, we may not have one ALS provider at nights and weekends. That's why we're making the changes to the schedules. At the end of March, we will have at least one ALS provider in there 24/7. But if that medic unit goes out, then you lose that capability. So that's why we're looking for the additional people, both for the ALS staffing, and it's also about fire staffing as well, making sure that we get enough people on scene within a quicker amount of time, especially in those more developed areas of the county, to be able to make an impact on the fire as well as the people that may be trapped in those structures.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Because that's something I would want included if it wasn't in there. And I think, I know several of the supervisors, that's a big priority for them. So thank you for all you and your departments do.
Thank you.
I must have misplaced my copy. I'm having to borrow one, so 1 second. Mary, looking at the request beyond equalized rate, could you explain a term to me? What is yeah, it's page 26 in that presentation. What is a civilian public education specialist?
Since the chief is here, I'll let him explain it.
We should just all stand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So a civilian public education specialist is someone that would, for example, go into the schools, go into local community groups, provide that fire and life safety education to the public. Right now, we're generally trying to do that as a secondary job to a lot of functions that current positions are performing. Whether we use a fire marshal to do that, whether we've been pulling some of our administrative clerical staff out of the office to do that on a regular basis, as well as we would continue using some of our engine companies, medic units to do so as well. But trying to get someone on staff that can focus on that, that's what they do. They work to coordinate those activities and, again, bring greater attention to the challenges posed in our community and basically provide that educational opportunity, not only for children, but also for adults. As we have a growing population and aging population, we need to also focus on injury prevention that could potentially impact those people's lives, whether it's injuries from a fall, which is probably one of our largest call volumes, that can have a significant impact on someone's life, especially for the elderly. So.
Thank you. This is listed as sheriff, so I don't think that's your bailiwick, though.
I'm probably not going to answer that.
Yeah. All right. Anybody got really good zingers for Mary? No. Sheriff, there's 4 communications officers and 3 communications operators. Are these like at
These are 911 staff.
911? Okay.
They're different levels of 911 staff.
Okay. I wasn't sure, and the use of communications is a little off. little generic. I don't know. Do you guys want me to read off what's on here, or
Everybody should have a copy of that.
I just happened to misplace
They
mine?
were given.
Yeah, either missed my copy or misplaced my copy, either way. So, pardon me, I'm a little behind. All right, I guess it's 26, 27, 28 is the list. So there is schools gap listed, 5 fire and rescue items, 1, 2, 3, just about 10 sheriffs. Well, I didn't count directly, but 2 for information services, 4 for ED. I think that's economic development. Reduce gun permit fees, increase tax relief, and remove a penny from PP must be personal property rate. So if you did everything on that list without anything additional, it ends up being 4.2 million, or just about just a hair over 3 cents in the tax rate. And they also had an additional 5%. They also listed something for all the requests plus an additional 5 cents off the personal property rate, which makes it 4.5 million and 3.36 cents increase.
That would total, if you add that plus the equalized rate, it's 85 cents, the current rate.
Which one? The
If you
315
take
or the 336?
The 336 plus the .8164 is 85 cents even,
Okay.
which is the current rate.
Mary, do you know if that was intentional to say, okay?
I figured.
I figured as much. I just wanted to ask for the record if that was intentional or not. Okay, well, what do you guys say? What do you think? Do you want to say, look at funding the stuff beyond the equalized rate, or do we want to, I mean, everybody's going to have,
I think we need to
Think so.
discuss that at our March meeting. These funding beyond.
requesting beyond the equalized rate.
I mean, if we're gonna table the other stuff, let's table this, since we haven't had time to discuss it.
Nods?
The problem with tabling this is the fact that we could make a difference here, whereas we do not have time to make a difference with the others. We just don't. It's going to take too long to do the research and come back to everybody with the retirement. And the schools have already changed theirs. They had to go by VRS policy. They have changed it. They pay $214. Once you're on Medicare, they offer a Medicare supplement that you can then purchase from them for, I can't remember, $117 for spouse and $36 and change for yourself. So they have already made those changes. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to help them make changes further. Everybody else was grandfathered in per VRS rules. Now with this,
No,
we
no,
could
no.
make a
VRS
difference.
does not dictate, other than giving us that, so much money per year. Benefits, other than retirement, are strictly mandated by the school divisions. VRS does not mandate anything on the health insurance. They will just give you that. I can't remember how much it is for a year, whether it's $8 or $6 for every year you served.
Well, either way, there's nothing they can do about it at this point. They've already done it. It's in there. It will eventually come to pass. And as the newer kids retire years down the road, that will go into effect then. They've already made their changes. Whereas we can help the citizens of our county right now. And we can help our fire department. We can help our sheriff's department. We can help, hopefully, economic development. I mean, that helps everybody in the county. We can help the schools, which is what brings in a lot of this. If we have good fire, good rescue, good schools, people are going to want to come here. Businesses are going to want to come here. Residents are going to want to come here. And let's face facts, with all the new houses going up, we're going to need to build new schools, unfortunately, coming up here very soon. We can make a difference with the tax rate. We can't make a difference right now with the retirement rate and the health rate.
They cannot approve the budget because of the biennium until April 5th of this year.
I
So we
understand
do
that.
have time to,
But
we can present again.
Yeah, but our presentation's tomorrow.
No,
And
but
we
we-
already have these figures in front of us. Let's set forth tomorrow before they're talking to each other and deciding already on their tax rate. Let's
I'm not
do it
voting
now.
for adding anything. I need to stay
Let's
more.
try to help the citizens of our county now, rather than push that off.
For the record, we have to have our presentation tomorrow. However, it does not mandate that that's the only presentation we give.
That's what
I
I'm
understand that, but on top of that, we also know some of our gentlemen talk to each other and decide on the tax rate well before that March 29th date. We know that happens. So maybe if we put forth that our citizens deserve a fully funded budget and that our departments that have cut deserve to get some of their new employees so that their citizens are safer. I mean, heaven forbid something happens here, like happened in Florida. Do we have enough fire, rescue, advanced life-saving people? Do we have enough sheriff's officers to come over? I have to think about that every day. My school's next door. We have had to go on lockdown because somebody escaped who was supposed to be going on trial. It's scary to try to keep 100 children quiet for an hour and a half. It's not easy, and I've done it.
I got it. So what would you suggest for him to put into the brief?
That we strongly recommend that every department be fully funded, and that they leave the tax rate at 85 cents.
Well, that does give us
I do not agree with that. You've got stuff in here, if you're looking on page 15, where you have 3 work sessions, but some of the other stuff that they're asking to fund, I would not personally put it in I wouldn't have put it in the budget either.
Like what?
Reducing gun fees to a minimum.
Okay, I said departments. I did not say reduce your gun fee. I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. But I
I
meant the
certainly would
deposit
not agree with
departments.
that. The Marine Patrol overtime increase, there's been a lot of money spent on boats this budget cycle, and I would not agree with fully funding that.
But we don't know what that's for. I'm going to guess that's for
yeah,
Lake
we do.
Anna. It's for Lake Anna, correct? And we have
Correct.
had several drownings on Lake Anna lately because people have not been exactly in their right mind because they imbibed a little too much. So that, to me, that's keeping people safe. That should stay in the budget.
It's not in the budget.
You're right, it's not, but it should be. But it's not because they want to equalize the tax rate again. You can't keep equalizing because eventually they're going to get a 10 or 15 cent raise because something catastrophic is going to happen and they're not going to have the money to pay for it.
Well, the equalized rate is 101%. So everyone's taxes are going up 1% anyway. So they are going to have more money. I'm not saying the equalized rate, but there still will be, and I'm correct on that, aren't I, Mary? It's 101%,
The calculation.
the equalized rate.
The calculation gets you back to 101%, but does not, it's a little more complicated than everyone paying more. I mean,
course.
depending on your assessment, on average, I think it was 7.7% total. That's commercial and residential. There are some people whose assessments went down. There are some people's assessments went up 20%. I mean, it's not, there is no, we don't do an equalized rate for every individual person. We do an equalized rate overall, and the state code allows 101% because of growth that occurs. So it is based on the state code calculation allowances, and it will vary tremendously from person to person depending on your personal circumstances and the assessment of your home.
So what does that 1%, since you're doing that, I think, on the overall?
It
How
looks-
much revenue does that extra 1%?
I don't have the
Do you
number
any
off the top of
clue?
my head, but I can tell you what it would be at 100% versus 101. It's not, I don't recall that it's significant, Catherine, but I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's a calculation that's done based on the state process and the allowances, and it is, the 1%, I believe, is built into for growth that has occurred from year to year because you only assess every 2 years. But it's a calculation, so it can be done at 100, it can be done at 101. But even if it was done at 100, that does not mean that nobody's going to see a tax increase.
Sure.
At 0.8164, people are going to pay less, and people are going to pay more. I mean, because it's an average. An average is just that. All 40,000 homes are assessed, and however many properties are there, and I used 40 as a round number, but it is not individual. We do not look at the individual rate and give everybody an equalized rate. It's a single rate, and what happens to your particular property can vary. And I do know of people whose assessments went up 20-some%. I know of people whose assessments went down. So it is not, there's no single rate or that's going to make everything right across the board.
I have
It's
a
not gonna
friend
happen.
who the house went down, the land went up, she's exact same,
Right,
identical.
yeah.
But the recession's over. It's time we started bringing our services back in line to where they really truly need to be. And how many positions did you lose, Chief, over the recession? I know the schools lost 300.
We've been fortunate, to be very open and honest here, we have not lost any positions.
Good.
However, our demand for service has gone up significantly. So
And
that's
it's going
what
to
we're trying
continue
keep
going up
pace
with those new houses going in, correct?
Correct.
So are our sheriffs. We cannot keep equalizing and level funding everybody when we're building and building and building and not expect to have to spend more money.
I don't want us to keep belaboring this. Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we recommend 85-cent tax rate and that they fully fund every department's budget.
As chairman, I'm going to make a note that I don't want to deal with policy, and that sounds very much across the policy line. And
It will, do we follow Robert's rules? If we do, we can't talk till there's a second.
I understand, but this goes back to the bylaws.
Okay.
I don't believe it's allowed by bylaws because we're supposed to look for savings in the budget. I am not very keen on I'm not keen on requesting to add stuff without also having something taking off. Because I can't say we should add firefighters and cost without then turning around and saying, because we can get the savings from over here. And that's why I'm speaking up. I know about Robert's rules and everything else, but I think it goes against the bylaws. We can cross that, check that, but I do not want to cover that. Mary, do you have the most current?
The most current set of bylaws are lengthy, but the section I think you're referring to is the outcome section of the bylaws, and it says the Citizen Budget Review Committee shall provide a report to the Board of Supervisors regarding the county administrator's recommended budget and the school superintendent's recommended budget, including specific actions or spending strategies as deemed appropriate by the committee. An initial budget review report shall be delivered to the board no later than the next regularly scheduled board meeting following the meeting in which the county administrator presents his budget. He presented on the 13th. Tomorrow will be the next regularly scheduled board meeting. If necessary, the committee may provide a supplementary follow-up presentation to the board not later than the second regularly scheduled board meeting, which would be the first meeting in March. I don't have that calendar in front of me, the second Tuesday in March. Following the meeting at which the county administrator presents his budget. And then it goes on to say, in cases where 2 or more members disagree with the report of the majority, a minority report may be included as an addendum to the final report. It does allow you to have interim reports and recommendations may be presented to the Board of Supervisors prior to the presentation of the county administrator's recommended budget at the request of the committee or the board. So you can make other interim presentations, but tomorrow night's is specific to the fiscal year 19 budget. I would say one more thing. It does have a section here about the form of the results, and this might be part of what you're getting at, Jeremiah. The CBRC shall review and analyze budget materials and information derived from research. The results of this process may take the form of informational highlights, statements of fact, and general assessments with options for board action, with conclusions and recommendations optional. But it says, each CBRC recommendation shall include an impact statement which estimates both the financial and functional impact of each recommendation. Functional impacts shall discuss the effect on services provided to citizens and should reference any related policies or goals adopted by the Board of Supervisors. The primary objective is to provide information to the board that may assist them in deciding on actions that will improve the efficiency and effectiveness of county operations.
And I think in the overview, it talks specifically about efficiencies and savings specifically.
It does, the first statement, the object of the bylaw says the CBRC exists to review the county administrator's recommended budget and the school superintendent's recommended budget to ensure board priorities are met in the most cost-effective manner and to report to the Board of Supervisors information and potential adjustments to the budget to increase effectiveness and efficiency in achieving board budget priorities. In addition, the CBRC, at the request of the board, shall conduct studies of financial issues and report results to the board.
Yeah, and those altogether kind of militate against a policy discussion and more towards cost savings and effectiveness, which is what I've been trying to lean towards, which is why I'm stepping in, because I don't think it's in line with the bylaws. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Dawn, and I don't necessarily disagree. However, I have to follow the rules that I've got, unfortunately, in this sense.
Just heard 2 different things then. Because what I heard was to make recommendations, not necessarily that you could not state, that you had to find it. You just have to look and make sure that the priorities of the county are in line with the money they want to spend. That's what I heard.
I specifically calls out the Board of Supervisors policies and approaches and such. So I'm going to use my chairman position and say that needs to be tabled. If you can find a non-policy way of mentioning it or find an equivalency, then I'm all for it. But we need to have it. We need to follow the rules. Anyone else? Okay. So I'm thinking, lacking any other additional ones, I think for FY19, we're going to say that we are going to continue working with the county and schools as for the recommendations and any open items that still exist. I will probably complain that 2 weeks is way too short, again, because it is. You really can't go through. I mean, the county's alone is 450 pages, and I know the schools don't really have theirs squared away for another 3 months, give or take. So it's really hard to take 2 binders worth of information and process it in any meaningful way in 2 weeks. And I trust both LaShawn and Mary do an outstanding job based off of my experience, and I do not think I can match them even in my best of days. So that's why I was also leaning towards the metrics discussion and such like that, looking at the county operations in a different way, applying a different approach to help figure out what needs to be touched first, because we all have limited budgets, and I'm pretty sure if they're honest, the chief, the sheriff, and every department has a wish list longer than they submitted. And if you gave them money, I'm sure they'd find a way to spend it, right, Chief? Yeah, shake your head. I know it's yes. So I know the argument of fully funded will always be an argument for county government whatsoever. But I need to keep within my bailiwick and my swim lanes. So I think I would just mention that 2 weeks is too short. We're going to continue working with them on long-term finding those solutions, because we also don't have any fiscal impact statements that we can provide for them in 2 weeks. That's just not something we can do. So unless anybody has any further suggestions or comments, that's where I'm going to take it. I'm inviting discussion if you have any. Everyone's good?
I would just like to add that on top of what Ms. Snapper was saying, hey, we have a great county, our schools are great, but we also have to realize is that we have building and all that stuff because of our tax rate. You know, I mean, that's a big part of why we're growing, because, I mean, you start raising the tax rate and, you know, people can build and move and live up north, because we have a lot of people that work up north and travel up north. So when we start competing with that, it's going to affect our economic growth in the building. So we just have to keep that in mind also.
All right. I'll resend out this when I'm done making the modifications and the changes, which means it will probably come out late tonight. I'm going to try and get it done by midnight. That's my goal. Mary will probably tattle on me tomorrow. And I'll also send it to the county once we're done, because we have pretty much no time to have officially. We're supposed to send it to the county first before we present it. So they're going to get it in their inbox at 8 o'clock, and it'll get presented 5-ish. Mary, does it start at 4:30 or 5:30 for the evening session tomorrow? 6. Is it 6? Okay. Okay, so it starts at 6. All right. So in 21-ish hours, I'll be back here giving this very presentation that will be less than 12 hours old. So I want to make sure that we can get it all together and on time to meet our deadline, and then we can have follow-on discussions. They have no problems with us coming to any of the following meetings, provided they have it on the agenda. So we can work through this stuff as we go through and accomplish everything we need to accomplish within our bylaws, and have a good result and provide the benefit to the county that we need to. Any motion to close? Sean, Sean fell asleep.
Will I motion to close?
I gotta get up in 4 hours.
Second.
I get up, I travel up north.
I know. All right. All right, we close at 8:47. Thank you all again. Like I said, I'll get this out as soon as I can.